Okay, before we get going, what I'd like to do is ask just a couple of questions to understand the audience a bit better. Could you put your hands up if you have one of these or something like it, which is a hardware wallet? Okay, we've got 10, 20 people, excellent. What about people who just have, say, a software wallet or an account at one of the centralised exchanges? Oh, even better. Oh, excellent. So we've got 30 to 40% of the audience have either lost some money or made a lot of money. So the purpose, therefore, I won't bother spending any time talking about about the blockchain. Rather, I'll sort of firstly make a bit of a disclaimer about my own company. I'm Terry Hilsberg. I'm a venture capitalist from Shenzhen in China. I spend about half my time there, half my time here. And we run, like many people, we run a dedicated crypto fund. And therefore, either on behalf of Innohub or myself, I hold positions in a number of the companies in the education space that I'll mention tonight. And so, with that disclaimer, I will press on. And the second point is that this session is for education purposes only. We're not trying to sell you anything, and we are therefore not trying to get any money out of you. So, moving on, the obvious thing which we're talking about tonight, which most of you would know that the blockchain is about, is the following, that if you look at a stack in a two-sided marketplace, in the old centralised model, you always required a trusted third party, somebody who could verify the transactions on behalf of the system. And in a Western society like ours, we tend to trust people like government, or some of us do. I must say the Commonwealth Government still doesn't have my medical records for their centralised system that they offered us all a couple of years ago. But nevertheless, we are on about the difference with a decentralised system is that people put their trust either in cryptography or they don't trust anybody. It's just about forming a consensus around not trusting anybody. And then if you go down to the technology infrastructure, obviously in decentralised systems it's about peer-to-peer, blockchain protocol, decentralised hosting, etc. So typically, in the blockchain world, there is an analogy for everything in the real world, in the centralised world. So there's a Dropbox for blockchain called Filecoin. There are analogies for AWS, such as Divinity or others. So therefore, this is the sort of world we're talking about here tonight. And the summary always is, we're talking about a decentralised database where the validity of individual transactions is verified and the history of the chain is kept by multiple nodes who have to reach some form of consensus. And this can be either public or private. Some of the people say that there's none of this blockchain stuff actually working in the world apart from Bitcoin. But in China, I know of networks now that have got 15 million users, but they're private blockchains. And so this stuff does work, but it's at the moment largely private blockchains, not public permissionless blockchains. So, therefore, there's got to be some use cases, and these are the sort of conventional use cases for using the blockchain technology. One that particularly works around the world is the immutability of transactions. A lot of Australians say, oh, but we don't need this, we trust the government or we trust people, therefore we don't need all this stuff. But I can assure you that somebody reporting on a biohazard in the middle of Africa, as Andrew's going to talk about later, is not going to trust government. And it will want some form of immutable transaction, something that can't be changed. Similarly, a Chinese customer who is wanting to know that the supplement that they're being sold at Discount Warehouse House in Sydney wants to know the history of that and along the supply chain. So these are sort of things. You can come down a list of this stuff, and the blockchain is better or worse for doing some of these things. One, for instance, that it's not necessarily so good at is privacy. A lot of people mistake that think that the blockchain is private. It's not. It's anonymous. But there are variations on the blockchain, e.g. Monero, which are private. But one other case that also comes up in education, and which I'll be talking about in a second, is of course the idea of the sovereign individual. The idea that Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't control a gigabyte of your data and shouldn't have a record of all your phone calls from the last 4 or 5 years if you used an Android device and were silly enough not to turn off stuff. But a lot of it in the end is also getting rid of middle people. I'll come back to that. Okay, so if you're interested in the actual design of crypto economies, there's some very good stuff. This particular post, I'll be posting this up later tonight. This particular article is excellent at describing the whole concept of crypto economics, and there are whole books on this stuff now. And it's all based around game theory. So in education, what are the possible use cases that we might see in education? And these are the sort of 5 that have sort of come up so far. The first one is the idea of the sovereign individual. That the individual should control their educational records, not the state, not the institution. Or at least there should be a sharing of that which has been permissioned by the individual. And this is one of the major use cases of the blockchain in education, which I'll come back to. Secondly, part of that then is also about, on the institutional side, education credentials management, such that they don't lose stuff and it's always available forever. For instance, I am very old, therefore, if I ask the University of Sydney to tell me what, the granular detail of my degree, my master's degree 40 years ago, they generally cannot tell me. The next use case, which we'll come to in particular when we're listening to Ken, is about, and also Biocoin with Andrew, is about creation of an economy where it doesn't exist now, and the capture of externalities. So, for instance, in a lot of the social good cases that you see in the blockchain, they're generally about creating an economy where one does not exist and capturing externalities that you cannot capture now. And that is a very important thing also in education, which we'll come back to, particularly with Ken and Andrew. Lastly, it's also about, it's also about rewarding expertise as opposed to the middle person. I'll come back to the fact that in some cases around 70% of all of the value of transactions in education is captured by middle people, not by either the student or the provider. Finally, we've got the whole area of management of intellectual property. So, this one, you'll see this tonight, it's too hard to look at now, but this is off our company database, is about 20 blockchain startups in the education space around the world, and they are, in colour-coded terms, this top 6 here are in the accreditation and sovereign individual type area. Okay, the area I talked about of either protecting the individual's data or the institution making the record immutable and or a mixture. And that there are 6 quite serious startups in that space, and they in turn have different motives. For instance, Learning Machine, which is probably the most famous in that space, is basically corporate driven. So it's essentially a private permissioned blockchain. Whereas some of the others, such as these ones, are permissionless blockchains, namely they're more on the student side of the game. So there's those ones. Then you've got these intellectual property management type blockchains, which are on about, for instance, automated generation of copyright information, or actually publishing journals using the blockchain. Then we move on to the more normal sorts of education areas where we start to have, for young people, various blockchains that aim to revolutionise or change K-12 education. So Ken will talk a bit about that. Lastly, we have a whole lot of startups in the post-secondary space that are aiming to change post-secondary education. Most of this is motivated, and all the ones that come out of the States are largely motivated by the failure. If you know, the real price of education in the United States, along with healthcare, outstrips the rest of the economy, and is largely, if you did the projections, healthcare and education will largely be the economy within 20, 30 years. So those are sort of in that space. Now the other thing about this sort of table is where are they at in their financing? Their financing tends to be largely, these ones are all early private financing, largely conventional venture capital. And then in a number of them you've got pre-sales underway. In the ICO world, that means you get a discount basically off what becomes the public price. And then you've got 3 who, in this list, who have completed public sales. And generally speaking, those public sales are in the 10 to 20 million US dollars range. And they've all been done within the last 3 to 6 months. So this is a sort of snapshot of an early state. So a lot of these things are very early stage. Another characteristic of most of these is they do not have a product. This is not conventional startup land. Most of this is rah-rah stuff, and they don't have a product. So there's also a few who've been dead on arrival that didn't get funded, and that list will grow, I'm sure, over the next few months. So what are the underlying business models? And the way I describe the underlying business model of a lot of those companies is that it's like the Sydney property market. It's essentially people paying rent to actually get services, and then people hoping that the price of their house will go up, and then sometimes being disappointed if it doesn't. And so that's essentially, what that means though is that people hoping that the price of their house may go up means that they're often prepared to undercharge on the basic service and try and change the economics of the market. So the more fundamental thing that's going on, which Ken will return to in his presentation, is that in education, particularly in private education, about 70% of the total value goes to the middle person, not the teachers, not the consumer. And so what a lot of these business models are on about is trying, whether it succeeds or not, to redistribute the reward to the student via an earn and learn structure, and redistribute it to the people who provide the expertise, including the teachers. And that is a fundamentally different model. So typically, in a lot of the ICOs that I was putting up before, typically the middle person only takes 2%. Because typically marketplaces in Web 2.0 take 10 to 25%, the typical marketplace. Whereas these people are proposing to take 2%. Well, that's what at least they said in their white paper. And therefore, they're hoping to make money off the appreciation of their coin, but they're claiming that they will lower prices, reward students, and reward teachers. Then another thing that's underlying this is the creation of new consensus mechanisms. If you look at things like TripAdvisor, their consensus mechanism with an opinion on an accommodation property, their consensus mechanism is horrible because you can rig it. You can flood, people just spend all their time rigging it. Whereas what's happening in the education space in these new models is that people are coming up with new consensus mechanisms. And just to give an example, call it like proof of expertise or proof of outcomes. And those consensus mechanisms will use the new thinking, the game theory thinking from the blockchain. Finally, part of all of this is about automating the transactions in order to get rid of the middle people and the reliance upon totally human judgment. So that's the theory. Now, what though do I predict? In my view, the problem, one of the issues is that of those 20 ICOs I put up before, only 5 of them have people with domain expertise. They're mainly techies, lots of people with PhDs in cryptography and various things, but mainly techies who don't know how they're doing in education. This is both good and bad. It's good on the one hand because there's new thinking. It's bad in the sense that most of them will piss away their money and piss away their investors' money because they just don't know what they're doing. But they'll learn. And I must confess, 20 years ago I was one of them. Secondly, none of these models have been proven yet, because they've not actually got to a product. And a lot of them are reruns of failed Web 2.0 problems. In other words, in Web 2.0, what we had to learn was that in a double-sided marketplace of suppliers and consumers with intermediaries, you had to always own one side of the marketplace or have it developed as you develop your company. So, for instance, a lot of the marketplaces, you would own the supplier or you'd own the customer. The problem is that a lot of these models in education, they don't own either side of the marketplace. And in my view, will be totally stuffed by the person who comes up with a blockchain model where you own the supply side or the demand side. And that big battle is about to start. And the place it's starting, in fact, is not in Australia. The place it's starting is in China. And in this game in China, it's really about grabbing, as with Web 2.0, Web 3.0, the blockchain, will be about grabbing one side of the marketplace, in my opinion. And in the education space, in my view, out of those 20 ICOs I mentioned, 15 of them ignore the customer. 15 of them are about fiddling around with pedagogy and all those nice education words that on the supply side of the marketplace. They don't deal with, only 5 deal with trying to incentivate the kid or the adult learner to actually achieve outcomes and using this new technology to shift the margin from marketing to the student. Only 5 of them do that. The rest, in my view, are still, it's edutech as it was 50 years ago. Every edutech revolution that comes along always starts on the supply side because that's where the money is and tries to sell them something. Whereas 5 of these at least are thinking about the demand side and using the technology on the demand side. And we'll come back to that with our speakers. But on the other hand, another point about it is that the base layers of this whole revolution, if there is one, are still being built. It's the old story that everyone's jumped out of the aeroplane and is building the parachute on the way down. And that it will continue at least for a while, but there's a huge amount of activity underway. And my guess, and it's just a guess, is that by about 2019, we will start to see some serious applications that really do work. Okay, so resources. If you're interested in this education of the blockchain thing, there's a major OECD paper came out in November last year, which will be in the show notes. If you want to really get into this stuff, there are 2 excellent courses that Riley Batchelor, who many of you know, his Masterly course, I think is, from what people are telling me, is pretty good. And of course, face-to-face courses, Academy Shear doing stuff. And if you're just interested in crypto and never got really into it, probably the best repository on the net is the Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capitalists have an incredible repository of stuff on their website at that URL. And lastly, not all that much to do with education, but if you're just interested in the blockchain, the people at Bit Forward, UNSW, published over the weekend a list of all what seems to be perhaps 60 or 70% of Australian blockchain projects at that URL. Okay, so that's my story. Now I just want to add one thing to that. With Maria Spies was going to be here presenting, but then she had to hop on a plane to Beijing. But being Maria, she of course prepared her slides, and there's a couple that add some value. So Maria is at Navitas Ventures with Patrick Brothers, and she's like the god of analysis in the world education industry. So she prepared, her and I have basically the same story, but the twist that she's got, which I want to emphasise, is that her argument is that skills shortages and changing nature of work is putting a premium upon accurate analysis of skills and an accurate recording of educational outcomes. And so she has looked at the same blockchain stuff I've looked at and came to a different conclusion than I came to. Her major conclusion is that the place where the blockchain will take off first in education is in the credentialing area, is in the recording of people's skills, is in the measurement of people's skills, is in their CVs, etc. And so, and she also points out that some of this stuff is actually growing. So she goes through a number of the startups in this field, and she notes that they're basically doubling in revenue each year at the moment, from a low base, admittedly, but that is an opportunity that should not be ignored. And there are some big players in that game already, including the IBMs of the world. There's also some small players. But she's arguing it may be a small market, but it's real, and it's growing quickly. And she then goes on about these other smaller ones that I went briefly through. And she comes up with the same sort of list as I did. Anyway, her key point is this point that platforms for credentials, where the growth is in the immediate future, like some of this stuff works now. Okay? So that's her main point. Now, moving on then, is it Ken or Andrew first? Ken, you present first, mate. Come on. Okay, so now we want to just have a brief presentation by Ken Taggart of Chattykids, who's on about what's called LearnGold, and he will take us through that, and then we will break for some questions, because I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions about token design and stuff like that.
Hey everyone, I'm Ken. If I sound funny, tough luck, I'm Scottish. I don't really have accents, but I'll talk slowly, hopefully, except when I get excited and drunk. Alright, so as he's doing that, so I'm Ken, and I have a startup called Chattykids at the moment, and we teach kids in the West to read, and in China we teach kids English. So been operating that in that business for the last few years, and we see an opportunity with blockchain and crypto to use in our business. Thus, LearnGold, where you learn and earn. So the problem that I see in the industry at the moment, particularly in China, is ESL doesn't work. You go to universities in Australia at the moment, you'll find they've got high intake from China mainly, and those students are speaking Chinese. Why? Well, the current exam system just doesn't work. So in China right now, you've got companies like New Oriental, and they will send spies, teachers, whatever you want to call them, into the exam, who will memorise what the current exam questions are. They'll come out and they'll teach the students how to pass that exam. So what you get is kids not learning English, they learn how to pass an exam, and they pay money for that. And I've got Chinese staff, and I go, oh, you're cheating! And they go, it's not cheating. So in China, that doesn't mean cheating, that's just being smart. And so there's a few issues there around it, but the end result is they pay money and they come and study abroad and can't speak the language. So we need to try and fix that. It's not just pass the test, it's to speak the language. But it's expensive. So how do you get mums to pay the amount of money you need? Well, Terry indicated that earlier on there's a lot of middlemen. Now if you look in China, the dominant player in the online learning English space is Quidditch. They've raised 483 million in the last 2 years. They're huge. And they charge about 160 RMB for a lesson. Now 39% of that money goes to the teacher. 61% is kept by Quidditch. So the middlemen are taking a big slice of the pie. And the solution is a decentralized, independent, automated solution. And that's what blockchain does. So here you can have an efficient, automated network. And on one side, you've got the service providers, the teachers, who are all competing against each other to try and get that student's money. You've also got content creators who want their content used, and the certification providers. They're all trying to get the students spending their money. And the students, you need to have something that doesn't just let them pass an exam. And in the blockchain world, that's a thing they call proof of stake, which is proof that you have been learning and practicing English for the last 10 years. So with our product, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make kids want to learn. Because it's not good enough just to own the teachers. VIP Kids owns a whole ton of teachers as well as data, but it's the students that are important. Whoever owns the students wins. And so we want to use this technology to motivate kids to want to learn. And that is, you give them a coin, something they think is worth money, and it can be spent. That motivates kids. And we've done some tests where it's gone off the charts, and I've got 2 kids who see how much money they want to spend on Fortnite currently. It's big. We gamify learning. So we start to then break it up for the kids, so it's not a 3-hour boring lesson, but there's lots of fun things for them to do. Some of it's boring, like read a book. No matter what I do, I haven't worked out how to make reading fun yet. But you can do things where you can make them find words, you can make voice recognition where they're saying words, you've got AR where they're doing things and trying to find the word cat. So you can start to do some really fun things with technology these days, and we are actively doing that at the moment. And you can start to connect this with hardware. So we've already got some AR content out there at the moment where the kids can interact with virtual augmented reality things when they're learning English. But there's no reason to stop there. It could be a device that then gives them an XP boost as they're learning, and they learn more coins. Or it could be a robotics project, or a robot talking to them, and they earn coins during these activities. So that's the vision. It's a lot more than just learning a word on an iPad. In competition, we have found competing is massively important. That's how we can see we're going to build our community. Letting kids, schools, cities, countries compete against each other and have fun doing it. We ran some tests some of these events last year. That's real data. And these 2 kids here cheated like mad. And that was brilliant. There's Nemo was 7 and Fred was 8. And they managed to work out a game our system and cheat. That was brilliant. So we need to do more work to balance our gaming mechanisms. But it's great that you see kids really do respond to this kind of work. These kind of mechanics. So how do we start to then use the technology here? Think of it like a game. That's how I think of it. We're gamifying learning. So as a student, they start off as a level 1 student. They access easy content only, and they work their way through it, earning LearnGold, which is the currency, but also earning XP, experience points. That's how we measure how good we are, how they unlock new levels. Just like World of Warcraft or any other game that you might be playing. So over time, after they've been putting in the work, they become a level 50 student. And that then means that then they can unlock new events, like they can review other students' work and get paid to do that. They can mentor other students and get paid to do that. Again, it's all good. I've got 10 and 11-year-old boys, and I want them teaching other kids because it helps them learn. You want them to keep the coin. So this, as many of you will already know, to have a valuable coin, you've got to make it scarce. So you have to build into your economy a mechanic where they want to keep the coin. And here, we want kids to keep lots of coins that unlock discounts, special products, special events, special kind of things. So that over time, you've got kids here who are actually then providing services to that community, earning money, and they're also good at English. Teachers, again, just like a game, they have progression. They start as a level 1 teacher. They don't earn very much. They only charge $20 an hour. They're all new. But over time, they gain experience, they become a good teacher, and a level 50 teacher is a specialist at phonics potentially. They can charge $100 an hour. They can assess students. They can mentor teachers, and they can earn money from them. And so now you've got proof of skill. And this solves a major problem in markets like China. Because in China at the moment, I have seen instances where a mum has paid for a lesson, and the teacher is a Russian who is speaking English. They're not even a proper teacher, and yet they're paying $30 for that teacher to teach them. But the mum doesn't speak English, so has no way to know how good that teacher is. With blockchain, you can start to independently decentralize, validate, and provide a consensus that that's a super teacher. And the mum knows she's going to get value when she pays that money. The economy, the community, you want it to build up over time and become valuable. Because that means that your coin's going to become more valuable, and people are going to want to buy your coin, or they're going to want to somehow earn your coin. And what you find in my marketplace, you've got a platform, and then within that community, you've got content. And as you automate that content with an automated curriculum, you then generate a lot of data, which is valuable to help the AI be more efficient. Machine learning, even more efficient as it learns. And then you want a lot of teachers providing services, a lot of educational content, and a lot of students who are then going to be using that content. And as that community grows, it becomes more valuable. And we don't waste money advertising. A lot of the failed tests that I've actually undertaken in China and even internationally, spending tons of money on pay-per-click advertising that didn't deliver. And it's easy to splurge a lot of money. But there's people out there with audience. And because you've now got a crypto coin, you've got cryptocurrency, you've got blockchain, you can automate how you distribute the money generated. So we can automate social media stars to then attract users to our platform and give them a referral fee. Clear, transparent, and nobody then ripping the guts out of the system by charging exorbitant amounts of money. And this is how we're going to start. We right now have this app in the App Store, and you can download it today, and you get a coin for every question you complete. It's also live in China. And we're working with a social media star called Dave, who is based up in northern China and has 8 million followers on Weibo. And on the 3rd of April, our 100-day reading challenge starts. and we're promoting it, and the kids are going to get real LearnGold coins. So we're making some good progress, and we'll hopefully see good results from this test. And Chattykids, one of the other challenges when you're looking at the ICO market is you can't just come up with an idea and then think you're going to get the audience. So you've got to start to try and at least come from a base where you've got the audience. And luckily, we've got an existing product. It's not, the whole product suite's not built on blockchain, because we didn't start there, but we're now building on top of that. We've got corporate relationships with the Oxfords and Pearsons and Smith family. We've got a large network of teachers here in Australia and the UK. And we have a large network of students in China. So we've got access to over 10 million students in China today. They don't unfortunately all pay, we've got access to them all. And technology is an instant thing. You can use technology to spend lots of money, or we're trying to use technology to deliver value to the parents, the teachers, and also engage the kids. So that's where we're using voice recognition to actually interact with the kids real time. We're using AI and machine learning to try and make it a bit more efficient and automate the curriculum, the things the kids are stepping into. And we're using things like blockchain, we're using augmented reality to start to make it look, to interact and make some fun activities for the kids. And all these things can all be integrated together on a platform using a blockchain solution. Smart contracts, 2 minutes. Obviously, very important thing here in the crypto world, blockchain solutions, that's mega important for us. Decentralized networks of teachers. And also, one of the things in blockchain is independently validating something. So we can start to independently onboard a teacher and then provide a consensus of how good that teacher is, which is again very important for the mums. Team. You can see we've got a big team already and we need to grow this a lot more. Partners, we have some partners both inside the firewall and outside the firewall of China, and we need to then start to build a whole lot more partners there, because again we need a bigger audience on the network. Our tokens, so LearnGold is the token that we want that's got value. We want people to be buying and they mine it when they do educational tasks. We also then provide experience points where how we measure what level the kids are at and the teachers. Our distribution of the coins. So you mint a whole bunch of coins. We're creating 600 million coins, and this is how they're going to start to be distributed. We're going to sell 30% of our coins to generate funds in ICO. And we're looking to raise 25 mil. Soft cap at 15 mil, so we'll be happy if we get there. But and we're currently talking to the seed capital investors right now. And there's a technology slide. Nothing too exciting there. You can talk to Ali if you want to. Put your hand up, Ali. He's one of the techies that works with the team. And that's it.
Okay, Ken. Any questions of Ken?
When Lambo.
Huh? When Nambo?
Lambo.
What's that mean?
I'm wearing my Lamborghini.
Oh, Lamborghini. Not yet.
I have a question.
Yes, just John.
I have a question. See, everything.
Hello. Everything you described is nice. See, where is the real use case for a blockchain, or you're just using it because it's versatile?
No, so the real reason to use a blockchain is we've been doing things historically with points. I showed you a screenshot from our system. The points really generated a lot of engagement, but points don't have value. So by swapping that point for a coin that has real value, we then have the kids and the mum take the points that they've earned and spend it to get this kind of tutor.
Yeah, but you can just do that without actually having anything on the blockchain, right? You can create a gamification engine, and then you can have tokens and everything. And this is quite similar in concept to what is being used in Australia already, like mathematics, where they have gamification. And yes, I can see the value in it. But frankly, as an investor, I would like to understand, what is the reason while you're using the blockchain. So the only thing that I can see is independent validation. That's one of the use cases. But besides that, anything that you're saying now can also be done, in my humble opinion,
It can be.
without the blockchain.
The second thing I was going to say, once your cryptocurrency, the second chain is proof of work. Right, and that's the very important thing, because at the moment we've got a database and we record the kids every week. They record a new video of them speaking English. So we can so for years we've got kids from 5, 6 years old learning English all the way up. So that's to provide a proof of work for someone who can start to review it. Dig into it, watch the videos and go, oh yeah, it really has been doing that. But obviously it's in our database, it's very central, it's not decentralised. We run it, we're just another VIP kids, another middleman to start to make lots of money. Whereas trying to use a blockchain solution to decentralise that, so then that data can start to be viewed independently with some trust, not just playing the system. Plus nobody can change it. So we can start to then put data to the right data to the blockchain that then proves that little Freddie has learned English for 10 years. Look, you can start to dig into it. Plus you can start to then provide simpler metrics. Instead of somebody having to go in and look at a video that was recorded 7 years ago, you start to then provide your tokens, etc., that then provide that measure of proof of stake. So you can start to provide systems for universities and employers in the future. Start to go, okay then, you've got 1 million coins, they've been learning for a long time, let's go and check some videos.
Ask you a fundamental question. Have you told the Commonwealth Government that they have the permission to store your medical records?
When I provide the consent, yes.
Yeah, you've given them that consent.
Yes.
I haven't. And I'm like most Australians. Hell will freeze over before a government in Australia will have my medical records. But I'm quite happy to put on a private blockchain.
But in a private blockchain, like you're mentioning, then how do you achieve trust, right? It is still in the hands of a centralized authority instead of the government.
No, it's not. Like the consensus algorithms that Ken is dealing with at the moment will be randomly generated from amongst a bunch of people where you just need to get whatever you decide, like 5 or 3 or 5 trusted authorities to come to consensus. What's wrong with that? That's not centralized, that's random.
Anyway, we can have that discussion after the
Sure.
Yeah, because remember as well, when you set these things up, it's not Chattykids that owns it, it's not Ken that owns it, it's a foundation you set up, and that foundation is governed by a certain rules. You try and automate as much as you can, and then you provide, there's a base platform, and there's API, so it's not, I might be an English language platform, but then there could be LearnGold as well, there could be other platforms doing similar things that are using the blockchain and the coin to provide that service. So this is not me pitching Chattykids, it's just I came from Chattykids, but this is an independent thing.
Does the child and the family then own their data and they can use that going forward, or is that not?
Yeah, because then
is that part of the future?
what you can build into this is where the data is then added to the blockchain and it's there stored securely. People can't tamper with it and change it. You can leave it so it can be open so people can look at it, or you can put it into the control of the parent or the student, who can then let people look at their data and even then provide a transaction with them. Okay, then you pay me 50 cents and I'll have a look at your data. So this is, with these business models, you see quite a lot of them are trying to then generate revenue by people selling their data, because this puts the data in control of the consumer.
You might want to let Mark up the council.
It's funny because that is exactly the sort of thing people are starting to look at with this.
Okay, let's stop there. I'll say one more question.
No, personally, I think this is brilliant because I actually taught English in Oriental before, and I think I wouldn't mind make some bitcoins by joining your platform. My quick question is: Did you encounter some resistance or challenges to try to launch something like blockchain in China? Because at one stage, there were alleged government kind of outlaw of the whole ICO idea.
So, one, you need to be careful. Two, they haven't blocked everything, because what they've done, they've blocked ICOs, because it's a bit rampant and there's a real bubble and a lot of crooks in it. Honestly, globally, that's what I'm seeing as well. They clamped down on that. They want to regulate it and then make sure that people making money on these things are paying tax, etc., sharing data and doing all those things. I think what you'll start to see in China is they'll have certain approved or accepted ways of doing this. Now, we are talking to Ethereum at the moment, but maybe we talk to Neo. And Neo is a government-funded blockchain platform that does the same as Exchange. And so Neo is a very serious thing we're looking at right now, because it looks like the government's quite happy with Neo. It's a Chinese platform.
Okay. Sorry.
So can I just come on that? So I did some research about Chattykids on Baidu. That's an article I find. They couldn't find any sample blockchain. Is it?
Yeah, it's brand new. So we just launched the new app that then lets you actually earn a coin. And it's the advertising date is the 3rd of April. So that's why.
Okay. Sorry, Miles.
You say you're going to educate children and everything. What's your thought process or plan of actually bringing them into an ecosystem where they can earn a store of value and then actually go out and spend it? Because if you're doing a pre-sale and then you're putting tokens on an exchange, the token price is going to go up. And if the children are then owning coins with being educated, they're going to develop an educational portfolio, which I mean, how do you plan to allow a child to go and then spend that currency? Or, I mean, it's got. I don't know. I think it's great what you're doing. I mean, I've been putting data and looking around the world and see where English is actually. But I mean, there's just that side of it. I've incentivized the teachers, but the students, I'd kind of put them something on the blockchain where it's verified that they actually have done that education, but they don't get incentivized for money.
So you've got, remember this audience, this market for kids is from 5 years old up to 16.
Yeah.
So you've got the 5 to 10-year-olds you want to control by the mum. As soon as they start to become 11, then you want to give them access to things. And so, and then by the time they're 15, 16, they're deciding what they're spending their money on themselves.
Yeah, with the exchange of the KYC, going for an exchange for them to actually retrieve their money to use it. I mean, you're going to have shops that accept the Chattykids token for them to be able to go and spend it, which I mean would be a great thing for the economy, but it's just, I think it's the wrong way off of actually doing it.
Look, blockchain's very new. It costs about $500,000 to get your coin on an exchange right now. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges to be successful in this space. But this is where you also have a utility coin to then balance things out. So you've got a utility coin, you make sure that it's stable, maybe pegged or tracking the US dollar, so that when you pay $10 for a tutoring session, it's only 10 coin. And we do have a utility coin. Most of them do, because of this volatility problem. And it is a challenging thing when you're starting to try and model the economy, how it affects your utility coin, how your coin's actually going to get value increased, how does it then get used, how do the kids redeem it? Tons.
Okay, let's Andrew. Andrew.
Thanks, guys.
This is Andrew Robinson. He is one of the founders of a founder company called Biocoin. Called what's it called?
Questagame.
Questagame. But anyway, he came up with the idea of this thing called Biocoin.life, and go for it.
Okay. So this accent is American. I can't change it either, unfortunately. Some people think it's a little bit Canadian sounding, but I think they're just being nice. All right. So, okay, this is an education tech workshop. Who can tell me? Let's test. We'll run a little test here. Who can tell me what bird that is? What bird is it? What? Who? Wait. Who? I'm hearing it over here. Rainbow lorikeet. How many people knew that? Okay, interesting. rainbow lorikeet. This lorikeet is here in Sydney. How many people have seen it? Yeah? Great. It's probably worth about $1.5 billion to the tourism market. It's a top 10, considered one of the top 10 most beautiful birds in the world. And we have it right here in Sydney. Okay, we'll try another one. Who can tell me what that is?
Wasp.
What kind of wasp?
Paper wasp.
Huh? Paper wasp. Someone said a European paper wasp. Was that the same person who knew the lorikeet? Amazing. That's correct. European paper wasp. Our Questagame game just found this European paper wasp in a place it's not supposed to be, in Victoria. Never been seen there before, but our players found it. This is worth about $400 million a year to Australian agriculture if this thing gets established in Victoria. Okay, last one. Who knows what that is? Stink bug? Stink bug? What kind of stink bug?
Smelly one.
Smelly one. What kind of stink? Nobody knows what that is? Interesting. Okay, there's a lot of kids on our system who'd be able to identify that for us. That's the marmorated stink bug, worth easily over $5 billion if you find one in Australia. It has been cited 3 times here. If it is established in Australia, it will destroy this place. Okay, I'm talking about a major pest. All right? All right. So here's the point of Biocoin life. Species are going extinct in Australia at an alarming rate. We have to be more aware of the world around us, of life around us, okay? That we have to think about biodiversity, right? The environment. We cannot survive 2 weeks. If all the ants on this planet disappeared, we'd be dead in 2 weeks, okay? We need biodiversity to survive as a species. There are 3 problems that are preventing us from protecting biodiversity, and Australia has a really bad record at this. It's the worst species extinction in 66 million years. Okay? So the serious problem, people are distracted. They're looking at their screens. They're not learning about nature. Kids are not getting outdoors. They're not climbing trees. They're not learning about nature. Then, we don't have enough reliable data to make good decisions. And the final thing is we're talking about today with blockchain and so forth is expertise. We need to get expertise. So the Biocoin solves this. It gets people motivated to learn about nature data and collect valuable nature data. It gets quality. It ensures that the data is quality, well verified. And it motivates expertise for things like coins, earning, the ability to earn and own your knowledge. Okay? This is a big deal. The United Nations wants to engage 1 billion people in citizen science activity by 2020, so just a couple of years. We're talking 1 billion people will be going outdoors, engaging more in nature. That's their goal. Okay? So, let's just break this down really quickly. How does these solve the problems from the different stakeholders here? You've got the public, okay? At the moment, the United Nations and all these researchers and everybody who wants to make decisions about nature is just expecting the public to do this for free. They call it citizen science. They're volunteers. They think they're doing a good thing for the world when they go out and take pictures of things and collect this data and give it to the government, right? They think it's all volunteer. They're not getting rewarded for this. In some sense, you might say they're being exploited, citizen scientists. Okay? They're free labor. Okay? That's a problem. So how does Biocoin work? Well, imagine if you can, you know how Bitcoin works, right? You get your computer to solve an increasingly complex mathematical problem, and you get some Bitcoins. Biocoin works by going outdoors, taking a picture of something, being able to identify it, you get the coin for that. Okay? Does that make sense? You get a coin for your expertise, your ability to define species. The rarer that species, the more important it is, the more coin you get. And because there's a limited number of species in the world, we have an economy that we can build up. Now the other stakeholder are the experts, right? The experts, the problem they have is like, You send them that WASP, and they have to identify it for free. They're not getting paid enough. They're retiring. They don't make enough money, and we're losing out on expertise around the world. All right. This allows experts to be rewarded for their expertise. It motivates people to learn. What's the point of a kid learning how to identify a marmorated stink bug if they're never going to get anything out of it when they get older? Right? Why learn things if you're not going to get paid for it, if you can't get a job in it later? Okay? And finally, the last stakeholder are researchers, organizations, governments that need to know where the wasps are. Right? We found a gecko here in Sydney that's not supposed to be here. This is worth a lot of money to be able to map biodiversity, for schools to map their biodiversity. All this is worth a lot of money. Okay. So how are we going to achieve this? Well, blockchain achieves this. I don't want to go through all of this because Terry and Ken have explained how the blockchain allows these things to happen, but the most important thing is trust. Is trust. We don't think that our players who are out there playing our game, Questagame, should necessarily be trusting us. I don't know everything about biodiversity in the world. My team cannot tell you all the answers. So what we do is we get the best partners we can in the world. So we've got the United Nations, we've got the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, we've got CSIRO, Data 61, building the blockchain, but we create this community of experts who can decide what species are most valuable, where in the world people need to look for these species. And they can make these decisions in terms of how to reward them with Biocoin. Yes? So here again you can see how it works. You've got the three stakeholders here. You've got the public, you've got the experts, you've got the data buyers. And you've pretty much got a system that can work with these people paying for data. The experts are receiving the Biocoin, and the public are incentivized to mine Biocoin. I don't think we need to go into that because it kind of explains why the public would buy bio tokens. Well, because they want to learn about what species they have around them, right? They want to learn what something's called. You take a picture of something, our system will identify it for you. You've got the experts. Why would they buy tokens? Well, because they want to promote their expertise, right? Offering free tokens. You've got the research groups. You've got the governments. They will pay to get these biodiversity maps. Okay. And then we've got at the end, at the center of all this is a nonprofit foundation, which has lots of the top people from those organizations that I mentioned. Now here's the cool thing. We already have this operating. Kind of like Ken has the school's Chattykids already operating. We've got this working at the moment. So we've got players all around the world going outdoors, taking pictures for using our different products. So we've got the Questagame product, which is a game that motivates you to join quests, go out and find different things. We've got Ranger Vision, which is a school product. It does the same thing, but it's for kids in schools. We've got the data is being used by governments and researchers. 189 million records over the last year. So we can see that it's working. This is really interesting. This shows every expert on our system. Now we have thousands of experts on our system, and we can see who can identify all these species that are coming along. We're getting thousands of sightings coming in. We can see who can identify these species. I'll just tell you an interesting story. It's a blind peer review panel that does this. So you cannot cheat the system. This is really important. You cannot cheat the system. You give it an identification. There's another set of experts above you who will verify whether you got it right or wrong. So you can see that how many people have gotten correct IDs. Well, we had one expert who had a perfect record of getting correct IDs for insects. Never got one wrong. Then what happened was the expert panel disagreed with this person. And we were unsure what to do at this point because this person had such a good reputation. So we wrote them an email to that expert and we said, hey, look, you've said it's this type of insect. The expert panel says it's another type of insect. Are you going to stick with your guns or should we go with the expert panel? And we got an email back that said, I think you should go with the expert panel. I'm only 10 years old. So this kid knows a huge number of insects in Australia. And then we have a lot of kids like that on our system. That's number 4, Grisper. And then number 6, Austin, can identify pretty much any bird in Australia, and he's only 11 years old. We have over 80 conservation partners. The way that works is everyone who starts identifying on the system can nominate a conservation partner, and we make a donation for every correct ID that they get correct to that partner. So we've already got an economy happening. I'll just sort of finish off by pointing out that most of the citizen science activity that's happening is here just for social good because people like doing it. Then you add the gaming element over here, and people get entertained and they feel motivated and they like the competition. But then you add the Biocoin over here, and it becomes part of the economy. And biodiversity expertise becomes a part of mainstream life. And that's the only way that we're going to make any difference in protecting the environment. Got a really good team, top people from ANU, from GBIF, Denmark, India, USA, Australia. You can see here, this is kind of like what Ken was talking about, how the token is going to be distributed. One key thing is that one coin will be given to every school kid in Australia. To activate this coin and get the value, they have to go out and identify 3 things. That's it. That's the Telegram address. And yeah, thank you very much. This one hit. Yeah. The rainbow marquee person. Yeah.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I have 2 questions. One is, how do you stop people from gaming the system in terms of the data they upload?
Yep.
The second is a more rhetorical question is, why do I feel like it's okay to incentivize children with coin to protect biodiversity, and I don't feel it's okay to incentivize them with coin to do the basic learning that they need to do in school?
Yes.
That the end justifies the means in one case, but not the other.
So you're saying you think it justifies the means here?
This is just my intuitive ethical compass. Yes, it's okay here.
Interesting.
But I wouldn't want my second grader to be earning coin to go and read more books or whatever.
Right. That's really interesting. I haven't heard that before. So what was the first question? Ken, just remind me.
How do people not gain that?
Yeah. So we like Ken mentioned, you kind of like it when people try to game the system because that allows you to figure out how to block it. And we almost feel like rewarding people for doing that. There's 2 sides here. There's the finding of the species, and then there's the identifying. So the identifying is pretty easy. I think we've got that pretty much cheat-proof because we've got these levels of experts, so it has to go through those levels. The finding is a bit trickier, and for high reward things that that wasp, for example, or things that aren't supposed to be where they are in the global records. We make sure that the person has established a reputation. So we're constantly tracking this. If they're going to get a high reward, we make sure that it's a real thing. We also put the new users through a much higher vetting process than we do established users. The idea being that more established users understand why we're doing this, and they understand the ethics behind what we're trying to do. But that may be changed with Biocoin too, so we're going to have to watch out for that, definitely. I think, if I was to answer the second question, I think it's because this is imperative to the economy is so weighted against the environment and against the earth in so many ways. I mean, we're talking about going to Mars. What the hell is that? I mean, I would love to go to Mars, right? But we're neglecting here. There's so much we haven't discovered here. We don't even know what's under the ocean. I mean, it is so vital that we change the economics of this if we're going to have a future here now, especially for our grandkids. If they're going to be able to see the same things, that beautiful rainbow lorky isn't going to be here forever. There's lots of them now, but if we continue to act this way, it's not going. They're going to come into a world that's really different, and they're going to lose a lot. And the magic that is right outside in your garden will be anything that Disney can provide. I can tell you that if you look closely, you'll be blown away. So I think it's that. Now, I don't know if that answers your question of why koi is more acceptable for the outdoor stuff, but maybe that's some food for thought.
Right, next question. This gentleman.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. I really love what you're trying to achieve. I'm a little bit concerned, as with the last question, around the difference between a blockchain technology versus a Bitcoin implementation. And I look at this and wonder if you become successful at building value in the Bitcoin, in Biocoin, sorry. When we started off this meeting tonight, we started off with the example that kids in China were absolutely great at finding ways of cheating. And the logical conclusion is that if this becomes valuable, people will try and cheat. And if the value is in finding rare items in unexpected places where they shouldn't be, obviously the motivation then is to introduce those species to those areas.
Yeah.
How are you going to tackle that? Because if this becomes successful, it will undermine everything you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's right. So we were thinking about all these things. One of the things that we may start rewarding and looking at is absence of things not being there. It's not just about finding rare things. Let's say someone can take a snake in one place and move it to another place, or bring in jaguar to Sydney or something like that. It's not about that, just about that, and we probably wouldn't reward that so highly. What we're trying to do, and this is again why we involve international experts, we're trying to figure out how to save biodiversity, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. For example, absence data to show that a certain pest is not in a place, or cane toads, for example, is a really good example. Does everybody know about cane toads? I think that's been pretty well documented. So if you can prove that there's no cane toads in a place, and use gaming mechanisms and rewards for that, it's just as valuable as bringing something to a place that's not supposed to be there. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and we are discovering as we go ways to cheat-proof it. And again, a lot of it comes down to reputation. I can't give specific answers because it is different from place to place and from category of species. Like reptiles is one thing, insects is another. But that's why we have people like Donald Hoberg, who's the head of the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, helping us with the scoring mechanisms. There's probably not going to be a high range where you get so much more Biocoin if you find a jaguar in Sydney. We don't want to motivate that activity. So we're learning. And like I said, I don't have all the answers. Yeah.
For example, you have so many other ways to incentivize them using coin. I can use myself as an example. I'm halfway towards here. Most of the insects I see here are foreign to me, whether they've introduced or not. I would like to know what the hell this is. When I see a spider, is it poisonous or not? When I see a bug, what is this?
Yeah.
Just being able to take a photo and finding out maybe a day later, 4 days later, what was that bug? You get a million pictures that way.
Yes, you should download Questagame because that's exactly what it does. You take a picture of anything, it'll tell you what it is.
I don't need the coins.
Yeah, no,
want to know.
Correct. But somebody needs coins to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah.
And how are you planning to, are you looking to do ICO? Are you planning to capitalize? How are you actually getting are you going to use the existing currency or the actual mechanism?
Our currency is called Terry Hilsberg. He's the genius. But yeah, I think we are planning an ICO. It's a slightly different one in that it's not going to be a fluctuating exchange rate type of thing where you can make billions of of dollars if the thing goes up, you know. But it will have what do you call it? It's going to be like a gradual interest rate that's going to be fixed. It's because we're investing in the future. It's not so much.
And so then the capitalisation for this is what a question I was Terry, but is the capitalisation then what the Commonwealth Government research institutes would actually probably start with cash up front?
Yeah, a lot of it will be those organizations. Yeah.
One of the things that Andrew has achieved is he has got supported data 61. It's not bullshit. He has actually got it. And so the whole blockchain thing will be done working with data 61. And the exact form of the coin will also depend upon upcoming transaction implementations in many current blockchain implementations. In that this thing already, how many transactions a month did you mention earlier? On the centralized database you're running now, how many records are being downloaded?
189 million over the last year.
Yeah. And already in terms of new event creation, how many observations?
Probably several thousand a day, I would say.
So then the collaboration partner in the USA is iNaturalist, who are the world's largest. They're running, as you expect, they're running at 10 times the Australian scale. So this is a true network that can take advantage of the blockchain in that we're not only bringing on board what these guys are generating, but we're bringing on board iNaturalists and all its counterparts around the world. So the blockchain has to be able to perform at a TPS rate, so a transaction per second rate, which is serious, which means at the moment we might love, we'll program it in Solidity forever, but it will not perform at the level we need, and we need to use one of the blockchains that can perhaps achieve the transaction per second type rates that we need on this network. But it's getting there. It will be there by the end of this year, in my view. And so, but the key thing that is what I love about this project is that it's truly transnational. Andrew's got the head of the UN Biodiversity Program as an advisor. He's got all sorts of other people around the world, including his greatest competitor. Now, his main competitor out of the USA is on board. And that sort of stuff, I think, mainly, let's try and make it work. Sorry, just John over here.
I'm pretty interested in the expert system. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds a little bit labor intensive in the sense that, you have to have people, the experts, manually verifying the images. So, I guess my question is, if a user takes a photo, is there a turnover time in terms of getting a response back?
Yeah. So that's a really good point. Speed is a big factor in currency. So if you could spend more Biocoin to get a faster response on a more difficult sighting, it's worth it. Because we know from all our users that speed matters. Also, detail about what you found matters. So if you can have a high-level expert, you just found a stink bug, and it goes to the museum expert, and that person tells you how important that particular species is and why it's there, where you found it, and what it means to the ecosystem and all that, the more detailed information also matters.
But if you get a large collection of images, then a high probability that these images match to this species.
Yeah, so
you do a deep learning type.
Yeah. So we have computer vision as well as machine learning. So we're recognizing patterns, and then the computer vision can get it to a certain level too. So you see a magpie, everybody can take a picture of a magpie, and the computer vision will get that. So there's no point to spend Biocoin for that.
Yeah.
It's a very low level thing. But for other things, like this gentleman over here who wanted to know what something is, he may have a greater interest and be willing to spend more Biocoin to get it faster. I want it within an hour, and I want to know everything I can about this from the top level expert on the system. Switch it on.
Hello?
Yeah, that's better.
Yes,
Yes.
Getting back to biology,
Yep.
are you able to track changes at biodiversity at species level with climate change?
It's having our records, like those records that I showed you, the downloads, is doing that. So we are the largest provider. This game, it started off as just a biodiversity game, an outdoor. It started before Pokemon Go, actually. It's become like an outdoor Pokemon Go, like a real life one. But that data, we're now the largest provider of biodiversity data in Australia, expert verified biodiversity data in Australia. And that data, you can then visualize it, and you can start to track it against temperatures and climate change and all that sort of stuff. So it's really valuable for climate change. See when certain plants are flowering, where certain insects are starting to appear in a certain region, you can start to track all of that really well.
Another aspect of this that we didn't talk about, or Andrew didn't talk about tonight, is that he already has a customer base in the schools, in all the public schools in New South Wales, and now being implemented in Victoria and the other state.
So we've got, it's Victoria, New South Wales, and the two states, and it's going to Queensland.
Okay, going to Queensland as well. So the point is this, that part of the game is to eventually have every school in Australia and in China and elsewhere using the school interface with this system to become guardians of the ecosystem in their area, using the data that the citizen scientists and the kids have found, and then maintaining that data over time and showing whether the ecosystem is developing or deteriorating or diversifying and being less diverse over time in a particular area. And using things, added data from things like spatial interferometry to add to that database. And this is still got a vision, which Andrew couldn't talk about, but because it's a bit far out. But the idea is that we want to get, in particular, the children of Australia and of the world engaging in maintaining their local ecosystem and reporting on its deterioration or development. Okay. So, thank you. I'll talk one last question.
What's the business model there? So once you have the coin, how would you make money for the organization? I guess it's a non-profit that you said at the foundation bit.
Yeah. So maybe that slide. Show it best. Yeah, this one. So you've got the data buyers over here. So like right now, we're getting paid by Biosecurity, my company.
So there's a thing called Biosecurity Australia, and they have an equivalent in most Western developed economies around the world who pay for people to find problems.
Yeah, so at the moment my company gets paid by schools and councils and any organization that has land to care for to run competitions. Get people outdoors having these competitions. Parks Victoria, for example, paid for a competition. We have 25 universities signed up this starting April 1st for a global university competition, and they all paid money to be part of that competition. So that's how we're doing it, because they also want their students to be learning about the environment, and they want to know what species they have around campus, because they have sustainability requirements. And a lot of governments now are putting in sustainability requirements all around the world, so they have to get that data. And that's where the revenue comes from. And it goes all the way down to the individual that just wants to know what something is, too. So just like organizations want to know what a big piece of land has on it, or think of mining companies, for example, before they build a mine, they have to know that there's no endangered species there, for example. They would pay for that data. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.